Hey guys, welcome to Sports Fan Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Travis.
And today we're going to be previewing the college football playoff semifinals game between Alabama and Clemson. This is a rematch over the past two seasons of the last two national championship games, and it should be an exciting game. Let's start with previewing Alabama here. Travis, we're going to look over each team's offense and defense and give you guys a few keys about what's going to go down in this game that we're looking out for. So Travis, let's start with Alabama here. What do you see with their offense going into this game?
Yeah, well, Alabama had a terrific year. They went 11-1. This year, a lot of people kind of complained that Alabama had an easy schedule. It really didn't have a big conference win on their schedule. They still made it into the semifinals. I think this is good for college football because Alabama's a top program. Everyone loves to see them, in the national spotlight. But talking about their offense, they averaged 39.1 points per game, which ranks ninth in FBS. They averaged 470.8 yards per game. So this was still a very good Alabama offense. Then it starts with playmakers Jalen Hurts, who passed for 2,005 yards, completed 60% of his passes, and the most incredible part is he had 15 touchdowns, only one interception. So he did a great job of taking care of the ball. He's not really known as like a passing quarterback. He's more of a running quarterback. He ran for 768 yards, had 8 touchdowns, and 5.6 yards per carry. So Hurts, he had a pretty good year, in offense for Nick Saban. They really don't want them to turn over the ball, just be smart, and that's what he did all season. But the best part of the offense is the running game. That's Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough, which is a great 1-2 punch. Harris ran for 906 yards. He had 11 touchdowns and 8.2 yards, while Bo Scarborough had 549 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 5.1 yards per carry. So those guys really lead the offense. And then they also have possibly the best wide receiver in the draft in Calvin Ridley, who had 896 yards, 55 catches, and 3 touchdowns with 16 yards per catch. So he's really a guy that can open up the defense deep. He can beat you underneath. He's a good wide receiver. So this is a really good Alabama offense.
Yeah, and switching gears to their defense here, of course, Alabama is always known for their great defenses under Nick Saban, and that was the case here this season. They weren't quite as good as last season's dominant unit, but, last year's unit was a historically great college defense. And this defense was probably the best in college football when you look at the stats. Only giving up 11.5 points per game, which is first in the FBS, 258.9 yards per game. So they were absolutely dominant. We talked about how they didn't really, play any great opponents, say for like maybe Auburn later in the year who they lost to. But still, you can only play against who you're scheduled against, and they just dominate their competition. And let's just go on to their key playmakers here. It really starts in their secondary with safety combination of Mika Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison. We look at Mika Fitzpatrick; he's kind of a cornerback safety hybrid. He had 52 tackles on the season, 6 tackles for loss, 1 interception, 6 pass deflection. He's considered the best defensive prospect in the upcoming NFL draft. And he's a do-it-all type of guy. Like I said, he's a shutdown corner when they need him to. And he also be a free safety type of guy. And he also play in the box as well in the running game. So he just adds a lot of dimension to that defense. Ronnie Harrison, the other safety, he's more of a throwback in the box safety. 68 tackles, 3 interceptions, 3.5 tackles for loss. He does a really good job of hitting guys hard in the box, creating lots of turnovers, very physical in the box. So he's a guy to look out for in this game. We're talking about how both these guys like to run the football. He could be a big factor in this game. And then, lastly, Darren Payne, another guy who's going to be picked high in this upcoming draft, defensive tackle. The stats don't really, show how dominant he is of a player. He had 45 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack each. So the numbers don't really pop off the screen, but he's a big body. He's really athletic in the middle of that defense. And he's just a very disruptive player. It takes 2 or 3 guys to block him every single time out there.
Yeah, so then now that we covered Alabama's offense and defense, how do you see Clemson's offense doing in this game?
Well, Clemson, they're probably the most consistent team out of all these teams in terms of the top 4 for this college football playoff. They went 12-1. They won the ACC. And, their offense, it was very efficient this season. They had the challenge of replacing Deshaun Watson at quarterback. And I think they did a pretty decent job this season of doing that. They averaged 35.4 points per game, which is 20th in the FBS. 449.2 yards per game. So they're still a very efficient offense overall. And, we talked about going to their key playmakers here, replacing Deshaun Watson. Kelly Bryant had the task of replacing him at quarterback position. He had a pretty solid year overall. passing for 2,678 yards, 67.4 completion percentage, 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. They don't really light the scoreboard up in any way in terms of the passing game, but he's more of a dual threat guy anyway, rushing for 646 yards, 11 touchdowns, and only 3.7 yards per carry, which, in college football, they kind of count sacks as a rush for quarterbacks, so that kind of brings down his average a little bit. But he's more of a dynamic runner than a passer at this point. But he's still, he's done a pretty good job of replacing Deshaun Watson, which I don't think anyone can really replace Deshaun Watson initially. So he's done a pretty good job overall. But really, it comes down to the running back duo. They're a run-first offense here, led by Travis Etienne and Tavion Feaster is kind of a running back duo here. I'm pretty sure I messed up the name of Etienne, but, moving on here, he had a pretty good year overall. He led the team in rushing with 744 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns, 7.2 yards per carry. So pretty good year for him. Then look at Tavion Feaster. He had 659 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns, 6.4 yards per carry. So both of those two guys are pretty efficient when it comes in terms of in the running game. Both those guys will get a lot of yards per carry, which is really good, keeping their kind of offense ahead of schedule, making sure they're not putting a lot of pressure on Kelly Bryant to make plays in the passing game. And then when you look at their wide receivers, they do have some weapons on the outside. When you look at Deion Kane, he had 52 receptions for 659 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 12.7 yards per catch. And then Hunter Renfrow, which Alabama guys are going to know him for making the game-winning catch in last year's national championship game. He had a pretty good year as well, more of a slot guy in terms of this offense, but he had 55 receptions, 571 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10.4 yards per catch. So he's not getting a lot of yards per catch necessarily, but he's a very good possession wide receiver and very reliable player for the Clemson offense.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could hurt the Alabama defense with all these underneath routes that they might do in this game. But talking about the Clemson defense, I mean, these are two Goliath defenses, 1 and 2 in FBS. Clemson only averaged 12.8 points per game letting up. Their defense was fantastic all season. They also only let up 278 yards per game. And honestly, the best part of Clemson's defense, it all starts up front of the defensive line. I mean, you got Clyland Farrell, who had 62 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, and 8.5 sacks. This guy is a disruptor. You have to double team him, but the problem with that is if you double team him, they got 2 other great defensive linemen in Christian Wilkins, who had 52 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and Austin Bryant, the other defensive end, who had 47 tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, and 7.5 sacks. These guys are making plays in the backfield constantly. This is the type of defensive line that can turn over a game, can completely set the tone of the game. If they're just disrupting the rushing game of Alabama, which is the best part of the offense, that could really slow down their offense because Hurts, he's not really a passing quarterback. So if the Clemson defensive line could shut down the running game, get some pressure on Hurts, try to make him force some turnovers, they have him throwing. I mean, I could see this defensive line taking over this game and getting Clemson the W in this game.
Yeah, well, moving on to the keys of the game overall. Obviously, we kind of mentioned before, these two teams met in the last 2 national championship games here. So there's kind of a bit of a rivalry budding between these 2 big-time programs here. And really it comes down to the big question in this game is, can Kelly Bryant replace Deshaun Watson's ability to come up big in these games? Because Deshaun Watson, even though they lost the first matchup between these 2 teams in the national championship game 2 years ago, he was the main factor in both of those games and make sure that Clemson had a chance to win those games. And it might be a tough task for Kelly Bryant to come up big in this one.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to come up with those big plays that Deshaun Watson had. And over those 2 years, he just made great play after great play. He played well in both games. But I don't think Kelly Bryant has to make plays like Deshaun Watson made to win this game. Because you look at Alabama, and like I said before, they're a running offense, and I think they're kind of more one-dimensional. If this defensive line can slow that down, that can hurt them. And Kelly Bryant, he just has to be smart with the ball. He can't have too many turnovers. They have a great running back game. I know Alabama has a fantastic secondary. They always have a great defense. But if Kelly Bryant, he's had a good season. If he kind of sticks to what he's been doing, I think they can still win without coming up. I mean, I think he'll have to come up with a few big plays, but I don't think he's going to have as many as Deshaun Watson had.
Yeah, and kind of speaking about those defenses, kind of the last thing we want to talk about here is this is the battle of the 2 best defenses in the country in terms of points per game allowed. So this could potentially be a very old school, low scoring type of game here, which could be very exciting in my opinion, whereas the last two times these two teams meet, they've kind of been more high-scoring affairs.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch this game. It's going to be a battle of the trenches on both sides. I'm really excited to see Alabama's secondary go up against Clemson's wide receivers in the offense. It's going to be a historic showdown, though. This is the third time in a row they're playing each other. These two teams know each other very well, so it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting because, Alabama, they always have a great front seven, of course, but their strength of their defense this season is probably in their secondary with Minka Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison, whereas the Clemson, their strength is up front with Farrell, Watkins, Bryant. I mean, they're just a dominant defensive front up there, and it'll be exciting to see which defense kind of, becomes more dominant in this game.
Yeah, well, that's our thoughts on the Alabama-Clemson national semifinal game. Let us know in the comments below, who do you think's going to win? Let us know if you agree with us, disagree with us. I think it's all fair to say we're just really excited for some football on New Year's Day. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you can leave a like, subscribe if you like what you saw, that'd help us out a lot.
Yep, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to like us on Facebook. We're going to be putting some content out on there as well. And keep your heads up for a great national championship series between all four of these teams coming up.